Do you want a pancake?
Vanessa lives near the western city of Rennes with her partner and her 2 young boys. 4 years ago, her second child, Ilan, aged just 6 weeks, was hospitalized due to fever. After an initial examination, things quickly took a turn for the worse.
He
was sent away for an emergency scan. We couldn't understand why, they just took him away. 15 minutes later, they told us Ilan had several large subdural hematomas with lots of blood around his brain. We were told our baby suffered from shaken baby syndrome.
Aside from a large skull, Ilan showed no sign of trauma, but the hospital reported the parents for abuse. An investigation was opened by the state prosecutor. Ilan was placed in foster care, and Vanessa and her partner were taken into custody.
It was horrible. They turned our lives upside down. They tried to pit us against one another. I was so worried I'd lose both of my boys. One was already unthinkable, unbearable. But if my eldest had been taken away too, it was very hard on us.
C'était très difficile.
Vanessa was allowed to keep custody of her first child, but was banned from seeing her partner. It was another 4 months before the family was allowed to live in the same home again. Vanessa, who was home with Ilan that day, faced criminal prosecution. 4 years later, she's set to hear the final verdict at the Rennes Criminal Court. Dr. Bernard Echenne has traveled here to plead in her favor.
The diagnosis on Ilan was completely inadequate. We couldn't prove that he had been shaken, there was no hemorrhaging, there was no blood. It was completely baseless to say that he was abused.
2 doctors say Ilan suffered from hydrocephalus, an excess production of liquid surrounding the brain, which would not fit the abuse diagnosis. Ilan's mother could face up to 10 years in jail. After a 5-hour-long hearing, Vanessa is cleared of all charges.
I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm happy, but all those years it took out of my life. Acquittal is great, of course, but I've suffered a huge amount. The next step is to try to turn the page.
Vanessa has won her judicial battle, but she has no legal recourse. Since 2015, doctors cannot be sued for errors in diagnosis. Her case gave way to a battle of experts. According to Dr. Mselati, that happens often.
There are some judges who preside over cases and who see discrepancies. They then ask us to examine the case, and I can tell you that in 50% of cases the diagnosis of violence can be disputed.
Dr. Mselati believes the guidelines put out by health authorities in France lead to improper accusations.
Each case I examine says subdural hematoma equals shaken baby syndrome. And that stems from the official guidelines that doctors receive. There's no analysis. It doesn't take the baby's situation into account. I believe this is extreme.
Health authorities, though, say they follow a rigorous and scientific method.
We have a list of possible diagnoses that we examine. Depending on the story told by the adult and depending on the injuries that we have observed, we can say whether the diagnosis is certain, likely or ruled out. If doctors are unsure, then we have to report it to the authorities, then question the adults. And if there is still doubt left, then we have to separate the child from his or her parents. Is there any other way? It's not easy. Of course, we would prefer a situation where there was no abuse and no abusers.
Cases of shaken baby syndrome can be very complicated. No witnesses, very few admissions of guilt, and often no outside signs of violence. But the consequences can be extremely serious. Abdelsamad was just 6 months old when he was diagnosed with the syndrome. That day, his nanny was the one watching over him.
He's 17 years old. He isn't independent. He's unable to eat alone. I have to help him eat because he has motor coordination problems. He can't leave the house alone either. They're all serious consequences. He's got intellectual disabilities and he's visually impaired.
Abdelsamad, can you tell me what you do all day? Your daily activities?
I play sports, I go swimming, and in the evening I come home. I eat, I sleep, I go back to school.
Although there are differences of opinion when it comes down to diagnosis, specialists don't question the existence and reality of shaken baby syndrome. Vanessa has now drawn from her experience to help others. Last year, she started an organization that helps families who say they are innocent.